What is it about true crime that captures our imagination? Is it the shocking details, the quest for justice, or the glimpses into the darker corners of human nature? In this video, we dive deep into true crime tales. 10 cases buried in the archive, unraveling gripping stories of murder, scandal, and tragedy from the Lone Star State. From frontier lawlessness to modern-day mysteries, these tales showcase not just the crimes themselves, but how Texans have shaped and consumed crime stories over time. But before we dive in, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories like this. Number 10. Depression-era desperados. The story of Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow began in Dallas in 1930 when the two met and quickly bonded. Clyde, already a seasoned criminal, was soon arrested for auto theft and sent to Easton Prison Farm, where he committed his first murder by killing an abusive inmate. Paroled in February 1932, he reunited with Bonnie, and together they formed the Barrow Gang, embarking on a 2-year crime spree. The gang robbed banks, stores, and gas stations, leaving at least 13 people dead, including civilians and law enforcement officers. In February 1934, Texas Ranger Frank Hamer began tracking the couple. On May 23, Hamer and 5 officers ambushed them near Sales, Louisiana. They hid in bushes and opened fire when the duo stopped to help the father of their associate, Henry Methvin, who had cooperated with authorities. Bonnie and Clyde died in a hail of bullets, ending their crime spree. Even before their deaths, the couple had gained national fame due to photos found in their Missouri hideout in 1933, which portrayed them as young and attractive, glamorizing their lives of crime. Their deaths elevated them to legendary status, drawing over 20,000 attendees to Bonnie's Dallas funeral. Their story inspired numerous retellings, including the iconic 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde, starring Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty. Filmed across north-central Texas, the movie further romanticized their lives. Despite their violent crimes, Bonnie and Clyde remain cultural icons, immortalized in film and media as symbols of rebellion and tragedy. Number 9. Beatnik Killers. The Beatnik Killers, Carolyn Lima and Leslie Elaine Perez, met realtor Fred Tones in Houston on February 6, 1961, for a prearranged sexual encounter. That night, Tones was found fatally shot and burned. The pair fled using Tones' car, evading authorities until the FBI arrested them in New York 3 weeks later. Dubbed by the press as the Beatnik Killers, Lima and Perez were convicted of capital murder in May 1961 and sentenced to death. Hours before their scheduled execution in March 1963, a judge issued a stay, citing suppressed evidence. Perez was declared insane and institutionalized, while Lima was retried and sentenced to 5 years, released in 1965. Perez later escaped custody, was recaptured, and served 5 years of a 15-year sentence. After her release, Perez came out as transgender, becoming an LGBT+ activist and founding the Houston chapter of FTTB. She also pursued political office unsuccessfully and died in 2005. Number 8. Deadly Love Affair. In the early hours of June 30, 1964, Candace "Candy" Mosler discovered her estranged husband, Jock Mosler, stabbed and bludgeoned to death in his Key Biscayne apartment. While Candy had a strong alibi, suspicion fell on her nephew and alleged lover, Melvin Lane Powers, who was arrested in Houston days later. Both were charged with first-degree murder, with the prosecution claiming they killed Jock to inherit his $33 million fortune. Their trial in Miami began in January 1966, drawing national attention due to Candy's glamorous persona, her relationship with Powers, and dramatic courtroom proceedings. The case captivated the media, with restrictions on under 21 spectators and vivid newspaper coverage. After 6 deadlocked votes, the jury acquitted both. Candy and Powers split soon after, with Candy remarrying before dying of an overdose in 1976. Powers later built a successful real estate career, passing away in 2010. Defense attorney Percy Foreman, who represented Powers, gained fame for defending high-profile clients like James Earl Ray and Jack Ruby. Number 7. Icebox Murders. On June 23, 1965, Marvin Martin called Houston police for a welfare check on his aunt and uncle, Fred and Edwina Rogers, after days of no contact. Officers forced entry into their Montrose home and discovered dismembered remains in the refrigerator. The couple's son, Charles Rogers, who lived in the attic, became the prime suspect. Blood evidence linked to Charles' room suggested his involvement, but he was never found and was declared dead in 1975. Neighbors reported they rarely saw Charles, who communicated only through notes under his door. In 1992, a controversial theory claimed Charles was a CIA hitman who killed his parents to protect secrets about the Kennedy assassination. Investigators found tools like a claw hammer and scissors, but handled evidence bare-handed, reflecting forensic practices of the time. This case remains unsolved and continues to intrigue true crime enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists alike. Number 6. TSU riot. On May 16, 1967, Houston police blockaded Texas Southern University, TSU, during a civil rights protest that escalated into a violent standoff. Police fired 3,000 rounds into Lanier Dormitory, raiding it hours later and arresting 488 students in what became Houston's largest mass arrest. Despite the absence of looting or property destruction, the media labeled the event a riot. The raid caused $30,000 in damages, injuring 2 officers and killing rookie Louis Cuba, likely by a ricocheting police bullet. 5 students, known as the TSU 5, were indicted but later cleared due to insufficient evidence. The incident exposed deep racial divisions between Houston's black community and its predominantly white police force. Following the clash, protests against systemic injustices continued, including demonstrations against landfills in black neighborhoods. In response, the Houston Police Department established its Community Relations Division in 1968 to address racial tensions. Number 5. Odessa Lust Murders. Between 1968 and 1971, Johnny Meadows terrorized Ector County, Texas, with a series of brutal lust murders. The spree began with Linda Coggett's disappearance in 1968, followed by the deaths of Dorothy Smith, Eula Miller, Nancy Mitchell, and Ruth Maynard. In 1971, the disappearance of Gloria Sue Nix Green confirmed a serial killer was at large. Meadows was arrested in New Mexico for unrelated charges, but his boasts about the murders led to his interrogation by Sheriff A.M. Slim Gabriel. Meadows eventually directed police to Green's remains after they paid his wife $2,000. He confessed to multiple murders, though charges beyond Green's case were dismissed. Sentenced to life, he was paroled in 1990 but returned to prison for sexual assault. Meadows died in 2000, leaving a legacy of horror and unresolved questions about the full extent of his crimes. Number 4. Cinco de Mayo outrage. On May 5, 1977, Houston police arrested Jose Campos Torres, a 23-year-old Mexican-American and Vietnam veteran, for disorderly conduct. Instead of taking him to jail, 6 officers brought Torres to an isolated area called The Hole and severely beat him. When a jail sergeant later refused to book Torres due to his injuries, the officers returned to The Hole, where they assaulted him again and pushed him into Buffalo Bayou. Torres drowned and his body was discovered 3 days later. Public outrage over his death led to protests and highlighted police brutality against the Chicano community. 2 officers were convicted of negligent homicide but received light sentences, probation, and a $1 fine. The federal government later convicted all 6 officers of civil rights violations. Torres' death sparked protests, including a violent uprising during the 1978 Moody Park Cinco de Mayo celebration, marking a pivotal moment in the fight against police violence and systemic racism. Number 3. Tyler drug scandal. Between 1978 and 1979, the Tyler Police Department conducted one of East Texas' largest drug busts, targeting local bar owner Ken Bora. Undercover officers Craig Matthews and Kim Ramsey, later Wozencraft, built over 200 cases, leading to over 100 arrests. Yet Bora faced no charges. Soon after, Bora orchestrated a shotgun attack on Matthews and Wozencraft, injuring Matthews. Aide Ross Perot, chairing a crime commission, helped the couple relocate to a safe house. Both testified against Bora, leading to his conviction for attempted murder. However, in 1982, allegations surfaced that Matthews and Wozencraft had fabricated evidence and lied under oath, They confessed to drug addiction during the investigation and falsified their testimony under pressure from Police Chief Willie Hardy. Their convictions resulted in civil rights violations, and Bora's conviction, along with others, was overturned. Matthews and Wozencraft received prison sentences while Chief Hardy was arrested, though acquitted, marking the end of his career. Number 2. Luby's Mascara. On October 16, 1991, 35-year-old George Pierre Hennard drove his Ford Ranger into the Luby's cafeteria in Killeen, Texas, and began shooting indiscriminately. In just 15 minutes, he killed 23 people and wounded 27 others before dying by suicide after a brief exchange of fire with police. Authorities could not determine a clear motive, though Hennard was described as reclusive and possibly harboring a hatred for women. In the aftermath, Susanna Gracia Hupp, who lost both parents in the attack, became a vocal advocate for concealed handgun laws, leading to Texas' passage of such legislation in 1995. The tragedy was covered by America's Most Wanted, which angered some locals but received support from most survivors, including Hupp. Survivors like Mary Roberts and investigator Ken Olson shared their harrowing experiences in subsequent interviews, revealing Hennard's potential motives rooted in misogyny and racial animosity. The incident remains a somber chapter in Texas history, highlighting the impact of gun violence and the aftermath of a senseless act of terror. Number 1. The day the music died. On March 31, 1995, Selena Quintanilla Perez was tragically shot by Yolanda Saldivar, her friend and business associate, in a Corpus Christi hotel. The shooting occurred after an argument over embezzled funds, and Selena died from a gunshot wound to the back. Saldivar engaged in a 10-hour standoff with police before surrendering. Selena's death shocked the world, and memorials were held in cities like Corpus Christi and Los Angeles. Her death turned Selena into an icon, achieving a saint-like status in the Tejano community. The murder trial of Saldivar was a media frenzy, attracting international attention. The trial, moved to Houston for impartiality, was extensively covered by networks like Univision and Telemundo. After just 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Saldivar guilty and sentenced her to life in prison. Fans demonstrated their support for Selena throughout the trial, cementing her legacy as a cultural legend. What do you think? If these haunting true crime tales left you reflecting on the untold stories buried in the archives, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below to share your perspective on these chilling cases.